Hello friends, welcome you all to another video, and today we are going to continue the paper number 4 and unit number 2 section B, that is the Jacobian period. And today we are going to start with the second last term, that is the metaphysical poetry. And this is the metaphysical poetry is one of the most important school of poetry or school of poets we can see in the Elizabethan and Jacobean period, because John Donne belonged to the Elizabethan period, but almost his followers belong to the Jacobean period and Caroline period. So we can say that it is a part of the both the Elizabethan and Jacobean period, and both are the parts of the Renaissance period. So let's get started. So you know that it was because of the T.S. Eliot who has written the Metaphysical Poet, this essay, which became very popular in the 20th century, and because of that the revival of the study of these metaphysical poets or poetry restarted, because it is a rebirth of their study. Otherwise they were forgotten because of their different and unique topic and unique style of writing poetry. So, and you know that it was the John Dryden who actually, when he wrote about the John Donne, he used the word metaphysics, that he wrote that John Donne affect the metaphysics. That was the John Dryden has written in his book essay on dramatic poesy. That is the book. And it was the Dr. Johnson when he write his book Lives of Poets, and in that Life of Cowley he wrote that metaphysical. So metaphysical poetry or metaphysical, he used that word. So that was the introduction of this term, how the metaphysical or metaphysic word come and how it was applied to John Donne and his followers. Okay, so let's start with the another introduction, or we can say that the another part of introduction. At the far end of the Elizabethan age and the start of Jacobean age, a group called metaphysical poets became famous with the use of stark imagery in place if musical relics of the previous age. So in the previous age, in the Elizabethan age, we have seen the Elizabethan poetry, the sonnet, there was a musical relics, but here there is a stark imagery. Imagery is there. So John Donne, who is the pioneer of this kind of poetry, and he has popularized the metaphysical poetry early in the 17th century. So his religious poetry had a dramatic realism, colloquialism, and direct speech. George Herbert, Henry Wagham, Richard Crashaw, and Andrew Marvell were later poets influenced by Donne's work. Sorry, the spelling mistake of Donne here. Okay, D-O-N-N. So it is typed as a D-O-N-N. Okay, I express my apology for that. And made a progressive contribution to this genre of poetry. So it was a John Donne. Okay, so I will give you one example of John Donne. If you write the poem, the Phila. So the Phila. Okay, you just imagine that it started with the one flea is biting to beloved, and he said that mark that Phila, it has sucked my blood, now it's sucking your blood. Okay, they are in a garden. We have to imagine that, we get the ideas. And then he said that mine blood and your blood mingled in her stomach. Okay, so he, after that, he just gives the that situation of the mingling of the blood to the marriage temple, marriage bed. So he just applied a lot of images. So that is the stark imagery we can say in this work. So let's start with the features of these this kind of a poetry. So the features are there are 4 features of metaphysical poetry, and you can see here on the screen. So the work of this group of poets have several features in common. So first was that the poetry is to a great extent religical. It is a religical poetry. The second one is in the subject, it is chiefly religious or amatory. Number third, there is a much material facility even in complicated religious stanzas. And number fourth, the poetic style is sometimes almost startling in the sudden beauty of phrase and melody of diction, but there are unaccepted turns of language and figure of speech. So therefore it is called as a metaphysical poets. So let's start with the poets, and the first poet is the John Donne, was born in 1573 and died in 1631. And if I talk about his life, so Dunn, the son of a very wealthy merchant, was born in London. So his parents were Roman Catholics, and he was educated in their faith before going on to Oxford and Cambridge. He entered the Inns of Court in 1592, where he mingled white reading with the life of dissolute man about town. In these years, from 1590 to 1601, he wrote his satires, the songs and sonnets, and the elegies. But though widely circulated in manuscript, they were not published until 1633. Okay, so they were published in 1633. Even though they were written the publication, you can see the years, okay, on the screen, but actually they were written in that year, but actually it was published after his death in 1633. He died in 1631, but it was published by his wife in 1633. So after his death, Dunn seemed amused for worldly career, but this was ruined by runaway marriage with the niece of his patron, after which he spent several years in tutorship of the great. So in 1615, he entered the Anglican Church after a several personal struggle, and in 1621 became Dean of St. Paul's, which position he held until his death in 1631. So he was the first great Anglican preacher. So let's start with his poetry. So Donne was the most independent of the Elizabethan poets and revolted against the easy, fluent style, stock imagery, and personal convention of the followers of Spenser. He aimed at reality of thought and vividness of expression. His poetry is forceful, vigorous, and in spite of fault of rhythm, often strangely harmonious. So his cynical nature and keenly critical mind led him to write satires such as Of the Progress of the Soul, and it was written in 1601. They were written in a couplet form, later to adopted by Dryden and then by Pope, and show clearly, often coarsely and crudely, Donne's dissatisfaction with the world around him. So his love poems, that is the songs and sonnet, were written in the same period and are intense and subtle analysis of all moods of lover, expressed in vivid and startling language, which is colical rather than conventional. A vein of satire runs through these two. The rhythm is dramatic and gives the illusion of excited talk. So you can see a lot of beautiful poems in here, like Air and Angels, a Noctical upon St. Lucy Day, a Valediction forbidding morning, and the Extract. So Valediction was one of my favorite poem, and after 1610 he started writing religious poetry, and the greatest, the 19 holy sonnets and the relics such as Home to God the Father, and it was published in, it was written in 1617, but actually when his wife died in 1670, he wrote it and it was published by his daughter in 1633. So let's start with another poet, that is the George Herbert. He was born in 1593 and died in 1633, and he was born at Montgomery Castle, educated at Westminster School and at Trinity College, Cambridge, where he was appointed fellow and reader, took holy orders, and in 1630 became rector of Bemerton near Salisbury. So none of his poems was published during his lifetime. Only a single book named The Temple, which was published after his death, that is in 1633. And almost all the poems in The Temple are religious poet. So this book shows his zeal for the Church of England and concern with practical theology. He himself described the work as a picture of the many spiritual conflicts that have passed between God and my soul. Okay, so before I could subject mine to the will of Jesus, my master, in whose service I have now found perfect freedom. So that was he has written in the introduction of the book The Temple. So let's move to the another poet, that is Richard Crashaw. So he was born in 1613 and died in 1649. He was the son of Puritan clergyman, and he was born in London and educated at Charterhouse at Cambridge. During the Civil War, his professed royalist Semitic led to the loss of his fellowship at Charterhouse. He then went abroad and in 1644 entered in Roman Church. He died in Loreto. So his best work in the Steps to the Temple, which was published in 1646, and much of it was reprinted with valuable addition in Carmen Dio Nostro in 1652. So in many ways, Crashaw is not metaphysical. His poems reveal no complexity of mind, no conflict or tension, the manner is not colloquial, and the images are pictorial rather than intellectual, lacking the homeliness of Donne and Herbert. At the same time, he was the metaphysical fondness for the striking conceit, which in him often becomes fantastic. So let's start with the third poet, that is fourth poet, sorry, that is the Henry Wagon. So he was born in 1622 and died in 1695. So he was born in Wales and was descended from an ancient family. After Oxford, he went to London to study law. Then he turned to medicine and then practiced at Berkon. So his books include poems which was published in 1646, Alder Isakans published in 1651, Silas Scintillon in 1650, and Thalia Revelia in 1678. So Wegman's love poems, though they are often prettily and sometimes beautifully phrased, are inferior to his religious pieces, especially those in Silas Scintillas. His religious fervor is nobly imaginative and strikes out line and ideas of astonishing strength and beauty. His regard for nature, moreover, has a closeness and penetration that sometimes suggests Wordsworth. Next poet is Thomas Carey. He was born in 1594 and died in 1639. So he was born in Kent, educated at Oxford and studied law in the Middle Temple. He attained to some success as a courtier but later died in obscurity. His book Poems, published in 1640, shows his undoubted lyrical ability. The pieces are influenced by Donne and Johnson, but they have a character of their own. The fancy is warmly colored, though it is marred by a license and bad taste. Okay. So next poet is Abraham Cowley. He was born in 1618 and died in 1667. He was born in London and he was the son of wealthy citizen. He was educated at Westminster School and at Cambridge, where he distinguishes himself as a classical scholar. In the Civil War, he warmly supported the king, followed the royal family into exile, where he performed valuable services, returned to England to the Restoration, and for the remainder of his life composed books in retirement. So Cowley, even more than Pope and Macaulay, is the great example of the infant prodigy. When he was 10, he wrote a long epical romance, Paramus and Thames, which was published in 1628. And 2 years later produced an even longer poems called Constantia and Phillips, which was published in 1630. All through his life, he was active in the production of many kinds of work, poems, plays, essays, and histories. His best well-known poem is the Dividends, which was published in 1656. So let's move to the last poet, that is Andrew Marvell. He was born in 1621 and died in 1678. The son of a clergyman, was educated at Cambridge. After a period abroad, he became tutor to the daughter of Lord Fairfax, and during this period, he wrote most of his best poetry. So from 1657 to 1659, he assisted Milton in his duties as secretary for foreign tongues, and he helped to protect him from the royal wealth after the 1660. So he has written one single book, that is the Rehearsal Transports, which was published in 1672 to 73. So hey guys, it was the Metaphysical Poet and their poetry, and they have a very common things which already I have told you in the features. So thank you for watching.